Mic'd up.
Highlights from Lowlifes. Highlights from Lowlifes.
All right. Welcome to the show, everyone. I think this is episode 75 of Highlights from Lowlifes. And all of this time, it's only been the Lowlifes on this show. Alex Simon is our first guest ever. Welcome, Alex.
I mean, you can count me in as a low life here. You don't need
All
to,
right.
salute me
Very
there. You get, I mean, Rob's known me since like almost out of the womb in that regard. Like we're good here in that regard. So
All right. Alex is sports editor at SFGATE, and we're joined by him tonight. And we got Rob Lannerman and Marty Brown, and I'm Rob Weber. We're going to go off of our normal top 5 theme tonight, and we're going to interview Alex and learn all about what he knows.
Okay, that's the wrap.
Hey, we only got an hour, so
we just covered it all.
All right, so the Lowlifes are a group that start ball players in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. We were senior players, and during the pandemic, we couldn't play. We couldn't see each other, and so we started reaching out, doing mental health calls on Zoom, and those evolved into elaborate top 5 homework assignments that everybody had to bring to the Zoom call. We met the folks that mic'd up by happenstance, and they thought it'd be a good idea after I tried to convince them for months that we should be on the platform. And that's what we're doing. So Alex, as I said, represents our first guest ever. I have known Alex for a very, very long time. But our viewer, or I should say viewers, right? We probably have 2. But our viewer probably doesn't know Alex as well. So we're going to start off, Alex. We want to know what in your background gave you a love for sports, and how did that evolve?
Well, I didn't really have a choice in that regard. So my parents have both been sports fanatics for a long time. My mom played 4 sports at one point in high school simultaneously, while then playing college softball. My father grew up in the Bay Area, just an absolute sports fanatic like no other, going season tickets for the Giants and Niners. They got married, and I think met plenty of folks like Rob through the Giants fantasy camp world. They went there on their honeymoon in 1991, and I've heard a lot of stories that I never cared to want to hear out of that in that way. And so once I came into the world in 1995, I've tagged along to all other sports adventures and met so many people through that walk of life. And for me, I kind of looked at a career in sports as something where, hey, if this is the thing we all enjoy anyway, why not just do it for work? And have been very fortunate to create a path that allows me now to be the sports editor here at SFGATE, which is California's largest newsroom, and cover our Bay Area sports teams and other things all across the state from that vantage point, and find all sorts of weird and interesting and unique stuff happening in the state, or looking back into our history and finding some fun stuff too.
Yeah. So tell the folks your path in college to where you're at now. So take us through college and your first couple of jobs, and now to where you're at SFGATE.
I saw in your bio that you went to Musk University.
It is Elon University. It is not named after that guy. That said, there is at one point, I want to say probably pre-pandemic, where I think that university was trying to get in touch with him and have a fun event. I don't think they'd be doing that anymore. Let's put it that way. But Elon is a small little school out in North Carolina. Kind of went there. My dad quipped, we're only sending you there since the University of Antarctica wouldn't take you. Just to kind of send me as far away as possible. After college, I did grad school at Arizona State, kind of bounced around. It, was a tough time to graduate from a program right before COVID hit, but picked up freelance work all over wherever I could find it. Ended up landing a full-time job at Bay Area News Group at the start of 2022. So that's the San Jose Mercury News, East Bay Times. Kind of just being a back-end editor slash go do anything we ask. And I say, okay, yes, sir, I'm on it. And had a blast doing that, covering our local high school sports, going to all sorts of just random things, showing up wherever they needed. And then it was not last summer, but 2023 during the 49er season when I moved over to SFGATE in that way. So it's happened really quickly to some extent, but it's been a lot of fun.
That's great.
That's
So
fantastic.
what is the actual degree that you have?
I have a master's degree in sports journalism from Arizona State.
Okay.
And there was at one point in time I was going into broadcasting, and the way that those things go, sometimes opportunities are not as plentiful as there are people interested. And one of my good friends to this day showed up at the college 1 year before me, so he took up all the opportunities, and I tried writing and had a nice time with it. So it works out well in that way.
Good, good. Well, Robbie, you want to take the next question?
No, you know what? I think I'm going to turn it over to Marty.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
We had a chance to read your article about Ewing Field, and thank you. I mean, this was right up my alley. I love baseball. I love the history of baseball, and I never knew that the field even existed.
Well, that makes sense because it wasn't around very long, at
But
least for the Seals.
and I said, and even there's nothing left. There's no landmark. There's no sign or something. But it's a tremendous story. How rich baseball. Well, first of all, how rich baseball was back right after the earthquake in San Francisco. Because you mentioned two teams. You mentioned the Seals and somebody else.
So in actually that season, there's so many details that don't make a story like that you end up learning about. But the main caveat, so San Francisco was baseball crazy for a while in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And even after the big earthquake in 1906, they went to all sorts of lengths to try to keep the baseball team and the spirit alive. They quickly built Recreation Park, which was the name of like 19 different facilities. Anywhere that they played sports was called Recreation Park back then. But this one specifically was on, I believe it was Valencia and 15th Street. So you're right in the heart of the Mission District. And they built it so quick that they actually couldn't get one of the neighbors to give up their home or move to a different location so they could make a normal size field. So the Valencia Street Recreation Park had the shortest right field allowable in baseball. It's 235 feet to the right field wall at that stadium.
And I don't want to give away the end of the story because we're going to talk about Ewing Field. But after they abandoned it, according to your article, they went back to recreation. So they went back to the quote unquote little league right field line.
Well, once we talk about Ewing Field, you'll realize that they didn't have a choice. But yeah, because of this, it was a tiny stadium. It was built in a very small block in that way. And the owner, who also, helped save the league, J. Cal Ewing, wanted to build his own kind of landmark at that point. And he picked Ewing Field. He looks at a bunch of options, but this place is up on Lone Mountain. And if anybody has been to the University of San Francisco, it's basically right up by there. And their tallest points up as Lone Mountain. So they're building this kind of on the sand dunes. It was actually the Archdiocese of San Francisco. And if you guys know of San Francisco high schools, it was Archbishop Reardon, who was the actual person in charge of the Archdiocese at the time, who sold them the land and was ready to lease it to them for 20 years. And they built the stadium. And for the whole time they were building it, everyone's super excited. There's like one mention from somebody who was a former manager of the Seals about how windy it was up there, but nobody else pays any mind. They're just getting super excited, even though the weather kind of forced them construction delays. They tried to get this thing open by March, but it ends up being mid-May that they open the stadium, and they get to opening day. And I think, they say every seat out of the 18,000 they had sold. And there was probably thousands more beyond that. There's probably 20,000 plus at the stadium that day. They do parades. They're hosting stuff all over the city, and then they get there, and everybody just freezes their tails off. Like
Well,
it's not.
yeah, and the pictures they had on it, and you put them in the article. That's a nice looking ballpark. It still would be aesthetically pleasing anyway.
Well,
It's the worst place on earth to put a ballpark, but it looked good.
Well, think about it. I mean, you guys, I know, as part of the Lowlifes, do a baseball pilgrimage. What, I think once a summer you try to do it, right?
Yeah.
Right.
This is the same year Wrigley Field opens. This is 2 years after Fenway Park opens. There are stadiums that are built in this era that are still standing to this day. In theory, you could have a ball. San Francisco could have their own Fenway or Wrigley had you built this place in not that location. And I think that's the key caveat here.
But
it was pretty quick. They built this place and they get pretty good packed houses the first weekend. And baseball, yeah. Go ahead.
If I made one of the things I loved about the little jab you put in, and we're still talking about the build up to the stadium and how great it was, and they raised the ticket price from 50 cents to 75 cents. And then here's a newspaper writer saying San Francisco may not get to the big time in the brand of baseball, but at least we can secure in the knowledge that it's big league prices.
Yeah,
75 cents is a big league price.
I kind of that was, by the way, the reporter who wrote that is a guy who went by the name Scoop. I mean, come on. Is there no better journalistic? I want to do a whole story about how that guy got the name Scoop on its own, because that's perfect. But like this was a big deal right away, and everybody had high hopes, which is, I think, what makes how quickly it fell so miraculous and so remarkable as a story in that way, because it's really within a few weeks that you're down to like 200 people showing up for a game.
Yeah.
And the fog and the wind and the cold just completely making this almost a useless stadium. And I think too, in reading a lot of newspapers.com links and going back in the archives and seeing what other people have written about Ewing Field, San Francisco was the baseball market of that time. For the PCL, 30 to 40% of the entire income for the league was coming through San Francisco's baseball mad fandom. So we mentioned the Oakland Oaks in there. There was an agreement at the time, just because San Francisco is so baseball crazy, that even though they were called the Oakland Oaks, basically they played all but 2 of their home games a week in San Francisco. And in exchange for this, the Seals would play double headers on Sunday, where they would play the morning game of a doubleheader in Oakland and then come back to San Francisco to play the afternoon game. And the Oaks did the same thing. They would play one Sunday game in Oakland and one in San Francisco and one midweek game in Oakland. But San Francisco's, I mean, if you just add up, a game on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and 2 on Sunday, San Francisco's hosting 11 of 14 baseball games in the Bay Area in a given week.
Yeah.
It was a mightily important city for the baseball world. So for this stadium to scare the fans away like this, it was a disaster for the league. And it almost tanked the entire league in the 1 year.
Yeah.
Was that ballpark, was that considered state of the art for 1914?
Everything the thing that I laugh at, you could see the first day of the ballpark when they're there. And, the Chronicle reporter at the time was calling it, for undoubtedly such an up-to-date and beautiful home. And it was built in a way that they thought it was going to be their home for, you would hope, decades in that way. And it barely lasted months before they were like, I didn't use this quote in there, but by October and in November, as the owner's trying to sell the team and the stadium with it, because the stadium was basically, he was trying to dump the stadium on whoever bought the team.
Right.
But they're calling the stadium a white elephant imprint. They're calling this, just they're not cursing it, but they're doing the old timey newspaper way of saying this place is a hellhole. They need to get out ASAP.
And at one point during the latter part of the year, there was please tell the story about the Major League traveling team that came, and still, I get from the article, it looks like people showed up to see the All-Stars, but they didn't last very long.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is classic barnstorming years where, teams in the off season, especially the big league teams, if you wanted to play baseball year round, you had to go on the road to try to, get people in the distal towns to pay to watch you play to keep playing baseball. So I think some of this all-star team was heading over to Japan potentially. I don't know for certain, or maybe just to Hawaii, but they were heading out on a West Coast tour from the MLB at the time. So you're looking at, players from the Boston Reds. Not now we know them as the Red Sox, but the Red Sox, the Yankees, the White Sox, the New York Giants, the Brooklyn Dodgers, all those players come out and they play this game in November as the sale's going on. And the fog is so thick that people just can't believe it. And the crowd was slim to begin with. But basically, by the third inning, there's literally the All Stars are just playing for each other as if it's a scrimmage because of the fog that stayed there. Fog, undiluted and foreboding, was the main feature at the game. Is what the Chronicle had in their story about this. So
Alex, I've got a question. Where did you find all the
Yeah,
information
well,
for
yeah.
the story?
So one of the beauties of working at a newspaper is we pay for a subscription to this lovely website called newspapers.com. We also have our own, by working at SFGATE, we're owned by the same company that owns the Chronicle, Hearst, which we've heard has owned newspapers for forever. So I can also check the Chronicle's archives through work in that way. But newspapers.com has just a plethora of newspapers. They don't have every single one from the old days, but there's so many days where they have the full newspaper from that day, and you can just skim through, search for specific words, they'll highlight it. So for me, it was just going to newspapers.com, looking up, specific words around this time of year to see, like, was fog mentioned about the field in this day, when the Ewing Field fans and all sorts of ways. And I mean, there's so many things that I found. And Ewing Field didn't go away for a couple of decades and hosted other sports for a long time. But I thought just focusing on the one season of the team it was supposed to be built for would work better as a like kind of tight and solid story, just for how great the build up to it was and how quickly everybody was like, oh no. So,
Yeah.
but newspapers.com, it's I couldn't do without it for a story like this, and I would highly recommend if you are a nut who wants to do that type of stuff to take a look at it yourself that way.
And there's a picture in here which shows some people in the outfield, and there's a beautiful sign in left field advertising Acme beer. And I thought, as a low life, that it was it. I got to figure it out how to put it like big behind me or something, like
Yeah.
like blue screen or something. Just because there's the beer right there. There you go. So,
So Marty,
uh,
I can tell you a little bit about that.
go please.
When you take the train into the city, you go past the old breweries that used to operate in San Francisco. The two I know of are Falstaff and General. General took on the Acme beer brand. So they were a consolidator. And after Acme went out of business um, as a brewing company, General took it on and they brewed it until the General Brewing closed down. So, yeah, I like to add to Alex's story about baseball by talking about beer.
Yeah. Well, you also, I mean, as you talk about what Acme Beer happened, the advertisement right next to Acme Beer on that outfield wall is Ghirardelli's.
Yeah, I was going to mention that too. Yeah.
So some of the things are still around from back then. It's just
Yeah,
not
that's
Ewing
cool.
Field, that's for sure.
Well, and
Yeah, great picture.
interestingly enough, the Acme beer is around again. North Coast Brewing bought the brand and actually have recreated. They made other beers under the Acme name for a while. They got rid of those and they're making the original recipe Acme beers again, based
Very
off of the
cool.
original brewery's recipes. So
Oh, that's
you can
outstanding.
find those out there. We're sponsored by Almanac, of course, but Acme beers are pretty fun if you've got any knowledge of San Francisco history. So I quick follow up on the stadium. The pictures that were that were selected for the article, they're all up, kind of the outside of the stadium, the ballpark, the aerial view. Do we have any idea? You mentioned our baseball pilgrimages, and one of the things that we do, we love to walk the concourses. We walk around the park and get a feel for the entire park. Did you get any kind of sense of what if we were to go back to 1914 and walk the concourse, what are we going to see? What was it like?
Yeah, once we invent time travel, what are you going to be able to do, right? And make it
Exactly.
back there. I do think actually, so there was three big things about the stadium that I thought were interesting. The first was, especially given how Recreation Park was so tiny, the big note that they had for this is that they had an abundant amount of space for the outfield. So it was supposed to be not just because of the weather, but really because of the size of the outfield. It was supposed to be really hard to hit home runs, and then
Right.
the weather made it impossible. Uh, but the main thing in terms of the stadium was that it's kind of like a lot of what you would see, quote unquote, modern, even still stadiums in other parts of the world, where it was a totally split difference between the grandstand and what you would call the area where you would pay for box seats and the bleachers. And I don't think that even in the way that Wrigley still to this day has mostly a separation between the bleachers and the normal seating area. I think that was the main setup of the stadium. I don't think you could truly walk everywhere from a full 360. Also, part of it was that the right field area was not fully enclosed, so you couldn't even go through center field. It was
Oh
kind of
wow.
up into the
Mm.
hillside at that point. At one point, actually, they had to note that because of Lone Mountain there is a bunch of kind of like how we have over at Cal with Tightwad Hill. Anybody who was a tightwad at that point could just go watch over there. It wasn't even like a knot hole to look through. You just climbed the mountain and you could look straight down with a great view. They had to keep building a wall higher and higher and higher, which they said was to try to stop the wind from coming. But conveniently, it took away the freeloaders' view that way. So, uh, if it serves 2 points, but it works out pretty well. So, yeah, the key being after right field was so short, there's a depiction of what they would look like when it was finished, and they noted that it was 356 feet to the right field corner. So
Wow.
very
Wow.
important to have a deep right field after how small it was beforehand.
Right.
Wow. Well,
Hey,
I thought
hey,
it was an
Robbie.
outstanding article. Thank you
Oh,
very
yeah.
much.
Yeah. Hey, Marty, I just noticed that we've got some comments. Some people want to interact with Alex here.
Oh, far out.
Robbie, you want to play those in?
Here we go. Teddy bear.
Hey, Teddy Bear here. I just wanted to give a shout out to Alex, my teammate on the championship team at the Giants fantasy camp one year. That was a fun team. We all got along. We all had a good time, and we had more fun than everybody else did. How you doing, Alex? Good to see you there. Looking good.
Winning tends to make people get along better.
Well, it also helps though that that team was basically two families, and so you could not get along. That was last year. It was the first time I got to go play at camp. I actually have a story up about that if people want to read it. Getting to go play with my mom and dad at fantasy camp, play with my little brother, my cousin. But we had the entire Penny clan, which sometimes you feel like that's about 19 deep, but this time it was only I think about 4 deep. So, uh, but
Well, I think Mr. Penny has left in a comment for Alex as well.
Yep. This is our buddy JC.
as plentiful as there are people interested. And one of my good
Hey,
friends
Alex,
to this day
make sure
showed
to
up at
tell
the
the
college 1
story
year before
about
me,
the
so he took up all
San
the
Quentin
opportunities, and I tried riding and had a nice time
that
with
the
him.
fantasy
So
campers took.
it works out well
It's a great
in
story.
that way.
I think we have to
Good,
remind
good.
our callers to please turn down your radios.
It's almost like these guys haven't listened to KMBR and heard that for how many years over.
Yeah,
I
please
think
turn down your radio. All right, hey, Alex, bear with us. We have to do a shameless promotion now. Robbie, go for it.
Well, he did ask about San Quentin. JC did.
Mhm.
Yeah, another, the nice part of having parents who have done crazy and wild and weird stuff is that then I can turn it into content at my job that way. So it's nice in that regard. But no, one of the first times it's kind of become an annual tradition for a few of the sports teams to go play the Prisoners at San Quentin. But back in the '90s, it happened for the first time where Kruk and Kipe brought a team of Giants fantasy campers, and my dad was one of those guys. My mom very much was like, "I'm good. Don't need to do that." So she did not, but my godmother and a Giants employee at the time, Kristen Collishaw, was Lee Shaw at the time, kind of helped organize that. Another person who has lived in the same place that Rob has lived, which is next to me in the Simon household at some point in time. Uh, so It's a very small circle sometimes being in these stories.
Yes.
So
Yes,
Very true.
I have played at San Quentin. It was an interesting experience.
speaking of, by the way, somebody
Oh.
decided to stop in and bring some dinner.
Room
So
service. Room service.
All right, Robbie.
We are a
what,
professional organization.
yes, who's our sponsor again, Rob?
Well, as always, the highlights from Lowlifes are sponsored by our good friends at Almanac Brewing in Alameda, California. They are, without question, one of America's premier craft brewers. We couldn't be more proud or stunned that they sponsor us. I still scratch my head every day over it. Like, I'm not sure why I don't get a call that says you guys are done. But the beers are fantastic. The location is fantastic. I'm drinking the Porch Light Lager again. I really love this beer. I can't tell you enough how full, rich, and flavorful it is, and yet still really easy to drink. So delicious Porch Light Lager. Marty, what are you drinking?
I was going to be drinking the Rocktoberfest, but Big Juicy came over to the house over the weekend and wiped it out for me. So I'm back to the good old True Kolsch. You can't go wrong. This is a great beer anytime, summertime, wintertime. Light, refreshing, but a great flavor. So it's my number one.
And Alex, I apologize. Next time you're on the show, we'll get you a case of Almanac.
well, I was gonna say I actually couldn't have some today because I'm helping that guy who just dropped off some food coach 4th grade Catholic school basketball because he can't say no to a volunteer opportunity. But the last time I had Almanac, I'm a sucker for a good Pilsner, and the Crispy Girl was just incredible the last time I had it.
Yeah,
so
good one.
I wish I had one in front of me right now. Is what I will say.
Excellent knowledge.
I am drinking the Bunny Hill IPA again. I'm getting hooked on this. We always talk. Marty and I've had this conversation before. IPAs are not for everybody, but if you want to try one and get started in the IPA realm, Bunny Hill, as it implies, is a good starter IPA. Very smooth. Many people wouldn't even know it was an IPA. Very good.
Yeah.
So,
hey, and we
thank
got
you, Almanac.
We got a what you drinking from JC.
Mm-hmm.
JC here. What you drinking? I'm having an Almanac Seaside West Coast IPA. Nostalgia this week for the beach. Relaxed, deep, vast. Great beer. Cheers, boys.
Cheers, everybody. All right. Well,
is he describing his body type?
Yes, absolutely.
Looks like he's had a few of the Seaside West Coast IPAs. Okay, all right.
It appears somebody has made fun of me.
Yeah, but we'll get to that in a second. Let me wrap this up so we can. We thanks to Almanac. If you were in the Alameda area, or if you can make the drive, get over there and visit them. The brewery is amazing. Lots of food options. The beers are just unbelievable. And if you tell them you heard about them from the highlights from Lowlife show, they may take pity upon you. So let's see. Yeah, you did get. We got a snarky comment in from Tiger.
Hey Webb, this is Tiger. I'm wondering, when you played at San Quentin, were you on the visiting team or were you on the prisoners team?
Sorry, I'm not allowed to divulge any of the secrets that happened in the San Quentin realm. So, sorry.
But every once in a while that ankle bracelet will go off, so this gives you a little hint.
Hey, if you mention that the Lowlife sent you to Almanac, do they then kick you out? That's the real question.
I mean, they put your picture up on the wall that says "Do not allow."
I just want to make sure. Want to make sure. The next time I'm in Alameda, I want to make sure.
All right, Robbie. You were gonna ask Alex a question.
Huh? Let's switch gears and move ahead 111 years to the recent Hall of Fame announcement. As baseball guys as we all are, and as a sports editor, we're always fascinated by the Hall of Fame, why guys are in, why guys aren't. Just looking for some insights from you. What do you think of the three that got in? Were there guys that were neglected? I know I especially with Dave Parker and Richie Allen going in on the Veterans Committee or the Eras Committee. That was kind of a big deal and long overdue. So yeah, let's start with your insights and let's just make this a conversation.
I think it was about time for Billy Wagner to get in because closers, especially, have been incredibly underserved by the baseball writers. I am not a part of the BBWAA. I don't want to overly criticize them too much, just because I do understand it's a difficult job. But we're hitting the point where I think the backlog of all of these steroid adjacent people and the folks who have been vilified are no longer on the ballot, and so it becomes a question of how many people from this era are representative of the Hall of Fame. I do think in the big picture, we've had a lot more players because the league expanded all the way to 30 by this point, that these are all players now who are in the 30 team era. And in reality, I think we should probably see more people get into the Hall of Fame on a year by year basis than we were seeing in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, even, because there's just more teams and more players.
Right.
So to me, closers have become an unbelievably important part of the game. You
Yep.
obviously are losing the starters. I think it's a good thing, honestly, that CC not only got in, but got in as clearly and easily on his first ballot to indicate that the threshold for what we otherwise would have said for a starter is needed is lower, because frankly it is. In CC's era, wins weren't as important. The strikeout has become far more important. The ability to do what CC did kind of as the eras have changed was incredibly valuable. He's still a pure starter, and we're going to see plenty of those guys still make the Hall from this generation. But I think that, to me, both of those were positive signs going forward in that regard.
Yeah, I haven't seen a guy more happy to be inducted than Billy Wagner. All the
Yeah.
videos of him and his interviews, he couldn't be more gracious and more uh, humble. I mean, it's just incredible to really see. I was kind of on the fence with him, but after seeing him get in, I feel a lot better about it now. Did you think there were any misses this year, and or guys that are falling off the ballot and that kind of thing that you're surprised aren't moving up, or guys that you're surprised that are moving up?
I do find it intriguing to see that Carlos Beltran is not already there, if we thought that the lingering effects of what he did and kind of the whole Astros situation were going to probably impact him harder than anyone. I mean, it certainly, I mean, he lost the job over it. He was supposed to be manager of the Mets, and he lost that entire opportunity. But it seems as if the baseball writers have been far quicker to forgive that than they were anything even, whispered in the steroid world. And that to me is a little odd. It's also odd to see how much support there still is for guys who are not just caught steroid users, but multiple time caught steroid users. Manny Ramirez is kind of held with a specific number that kind of just raises my eyebrow, because, to be honest, like, everything about him screamed somebody who I thought, because of kind of who he was and what he brought, was not going to ever come close to the Hall. And he's not going to make it, but it's still odd to me to see more than a third. I don't really care. It's more, I just would like people to be very directional. Are you fine with voting them all, or are you going to not vote for any of them? And it
Right.
seems like there's enough people that, if we're going to treat the character clause as a thing, they've been inconsistent with it. And so him and A-Rod both are not going to make the Hall on the baseball writers ballot, and that makes sense to me. I, I'm kind of okay with where things are right now. I will say the biggest takeaway I had was that Chase Utley making the jump that he made on the writers ballot makes me extremely confident Buster Posey will be a Hall of Famer, which I wasn't 100% sure I was going to be that confident with until I saw that, because
Right.
there are less periphery stats and less of a length of a career, but the peak was the peak, and Buster has all the intangibles that Chase does, if not more, given the amount of titles. And I think I don't want to predict Buster's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, but I don't think he's going to be on the ballot very long, is what I'd say.
Right.
Yeah.
And I noticed that Chase Utley bump too, and it made me think about Jeff Kent, who ostensibly has better numbers.
I think
Where
Kent should probably be a far bigger consideration than he's been, but also, like, there was a period there where there was way too many guys on the ballot, and they just clogged the ballot in that way for a lot of voters. and I think Kent suffered from that. Also, there's, as much as we hate to say it, there's a jerk tax. And if you were a jerk to baseball writers, they're going to be a jerk back to you later in life.
Right.
That's obviously hampered Bonds to some extent, and I think it hampered Kemp a lot too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what they say about Richie Allen getting in. He probably would never have made it or didn't make it with the baseball writers because he had no respect for them at all, and maybe rightfully so.
I think
So
that's where this era committees really matter, because the peers know, your peers know if you could play or if you were Hall of Fame caliber or not.
I do think I would be intrigued if they switched up the process for the Eras Committee at some point and made it less of a you only get a set amount of votes and everybody needs to hit a certain number, and honestly just turned it to a yes no. I happen to be a big Hall guy. I would rather the Hall of Fame represent what is and has been good about baseball, even if it's not somebody who was one of the best players for the entirety of their career. Somebody, to me, it's a museum. It's obviously a very big honor, but I'm the happy type that would say, even like a Fernando Valenzuela, you can't tell if you can't tell baseball history without talking about a certain player and what they meant for even a few seasons. To me, that's somebody that should be a Hall of Famer. And
okay,
Good point.
so
Good point.
is Tim Lincecum a Hall of Famer?
Uh-oh.
Oh, he froze.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just a really difficult question.
He's thinking about it. He's thinking about it.
Well, when Alex comes back on, he's probably going to have a chance to think about Tim Lincecum. I wanted to ask him about the Pete Rose situation too. There are people that feel that since Pete Rose has passed away, that he should get in now. In fact, there was some that felt he should be immediately voted in. I you feel bad that the guy died, but did it really change the circumstances? So that's something to consider.
Yeah, and
Um,
we've talked about it on the show, that Charlie Hustle 3-part documentary on HBO.
Yeah.
I was kind of of that mindset before I saw that documentary, and I've said it before. This documentarian gave him every chance to show contrition, gave him
Yep.
every chance to show some humility,
So
and
acquiesce.
it was just lobbing softball things at him, and he couldn't help himself. Pete Rose could not help himself, and it it changes the way, even if you're if a Pete Rose fan, it's got to be hard to sit there and watch that and like, no, car crash, don't do that.
yeah,
And I mean, it makes it difficult. And whereas like Marty brings up Shoeless Joe Jackson all the time, and that's a whole same but different scenario.
Yeah, quite similar. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
um,
the thing that blew me away was in looking at the
hey, Marty,
statistics.
before you
Go
go
ahead.
on,
Go
can
ahead.
you tell us? Can you tell the audience a little bit about the Shoeless Joe Jackson situation? Who was he?
Oh,
And what? I mean, they know him as a player, but who was he in real life?
he grew up in South Carolina in pretty much abject poverty, no schooling. He never did actually learn to read or write, but he was a natural talent in the textile leagues, and these were all the big textile companies that popped up at the turn of the century. Just a natural talent for baseball. The shoeless story is it's still a lot of myths, but pretty much he got a new pair of shoes and his feet hurt, so he played the last part of the game where he got the big hit in his stocking feet. He uh, he originally was drafted and with major leagues with the Philadelphia A's, traded with the White Sox, and he got caught up in the cheating scandal of the Black Sox scandal, to call it, with the Chicago White Sox. And there was all sorts of stories, and some say he confessed to being part of the conspiracy to throw the World Series. Some say he didn't. But just like all the other guys, they were banned for baseball for life. And then using the same scenario that Robert was talking about, now that he's gone, he what should he get in? It's a
Yeah,
lifetime ban. He's not alive anymore.
yeah.
So
So welcome back, Alex.
gotta have it back. Thanks.
The phone dying doesn't help, is what I found out. Just staying on the
That's a good
stream.
thing. So before you rudely left us hanging like that, you were mentioning that you felt if you couldn't talk about the history of baseball without mentioning a certain player who was performing very well during a given period, then maybe that guy should be in the Hall of Fame. So that brings us to one of our fan favorites here in San Francisco, would be Tim Lincecum. Do you feel that Tim Lincecum is a Hall of Fame player?
I mean, he's Hall of Famer in my heart. Let's put it that
Yeah,
way. But
yeah.
I think he probably, within the relative level, I think he's probably not that important enough, but he's close enough and will get mentioned through other pieces of the hall. I think you guys were mentioning Shoeless Joe. Obviously, within that, Pete Rose is in the same vein. To me, you can always explain things on the plaque that allows for any of the other pieces of why somebody didn't get in the hall immediately and explain it just as part of the legacy of the sport in that way, because it is the legacy of the sport. Good, bad, and ugly, this is the sport that it is, and it's been the sport that it's been. The Negro Leaguers who have made the Hall of Fame didn't have made it late because of a lot of issues that this sport has dealt with in that regard. And so it, to me, that helps tell the full picture and kind of paints the full picture in the sport in that way. If these guys, if this is supposed to be something that you earn by merit, there are players who have done enough, I think, by merit to deserve more of a nod than we've been able to see them get for a variety of reasons. But I think, I don't know where you guys end up landing on Pete Rose. I understand that they kept him out until he passed away, and now that he's passed away, I think it would be smarter now to just make sure he gets in, just to stop having it linger over everybody in that regard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good point.
Mhm.
It's a good point.
The other
Okay.
the other thing you always hear about is guys that shouldn't be in there. And we've talked about how baseball evolves, but I think sometimes the Hall mindset doesn't evolve. Like they look at Rick Farrell and go, "Well, that guy shouldn't be there." But in the context of the time that he played, Rick Farrell was a real important player.
Yeah, I mean, you can also, we understand that the Eras Committee has kind of been a political horse game and a horse trading moment there. That's kind of, Harold Baines. I don't know if anybody truly thought of him as a Hall of Famer when he was playing. He was a very good player, but
Right.
the fact that he's in, to me, like, there's going to be an evolution that has to come as we have more and more players who played, period, and as it is harder and harder to accumulate stats for all sorts of reasons why. Obviously, on the pitching side, I think it's going to be a more difficult thing, but the Hall of Fame needs to reflect how the sport has evolved in each year. We haven't had the players have the length of career in part because the league is just too good for those lengthy careers to really happen in that way. We know who the ones who automatically make it, but should we really look at 400 home runs as a threshold to clear once we've gotten through kind of the steroid era guys? Because even 500 is a hard number for people to get to in this modern day and age because of how cyclical the sport is. It's just harder to have long careers at this point in time.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And
Joey Votto is going to be a great question mark because I don't think anybody would say he has the stats to truly be a Hall of Famer, but his career is very emblematic of somebody who's kind of an important piece of this era in that way. And now that he's retired, I'm going to be fascinated by how people view his career.
yeah, and I think some of those intrinsic factors have been lost over the years, like defense and leadership and contributions to the game.
Yeah.
I
I
mean, these
think
guys are going to scratch their head, like Rabbit Moranville taking a team over to Asia and doing a barnstorming tour with those guys. I mean,
yeah.
he's a Hall of Famer partly because of his contributions to the growth of the game.
And I also look at it, the one that the Bay Area Giants fans especially feel probably the most passionately about locally is like a Will Clark type, where you know he's not tallying the stats in that way, but you look at that guy and you know that that's the best player on the field when he was playing at certain points and made that level of impact.
Right.
That that would feel like the Hall of Fame to some. And he could have done the whole I'll keep playing to tally the stats thing and chose not to. So where should we view that decision in that regard?
Right.
That's
Right.
always, a question for that. But I do think this is a solid sign of the Hall of Fame, both from the writer side and the era side, that we are going to see it start to have more and more of a reflection of what the current baseball world kind of needs from the Hall of Fame. And if you're the Hall of Fame, I think you can't have years where you have nobody going in ever again, frankly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, great sense. Or makes
Totally
great
agree.
sense.
So what's on the horizon, Alex? What's the next barnstorming story going to be, and when can we see it?
Well, we're writing stuff every day over at SFGATE. I'm, fascinated by so many things happening in our sports world and have to help us get ready for all sorts of big events. I don't know if you guys are aware, but there's this thing called the Super Bowl happening. I hear,
Oh, is that the Mahomes thing?
well,
Ah,
to be honest, the thing for me that's more important is it's coming to the Bay Area next year. We'll be hosting it in Santa Clara for Super Bowl 60 in 2026.
mm,
And so it becomes a local event in that way, not just the global event that it is every year, wherever it's at. But I mean, NBA All Star Game is going to be here in, I think it's 2.5 weeks now here in the Bay Area, which should be
Right.
a big thing. The Giants are kind of being weird. I don't know how people feel about them, but we're trying to turn up sports stories.
you said that right. I was just talking to a few buddies the other day. Says, what are the Giants doing? And we just kind of looked at each other and went, Verlander, but that's what?
There's some mixed messaging, I think, that some of their attempts at stuff are continuing to send out. But Willie Adames is going to be electric, and I'm very excited to
Cool.
see him
All
with
right.
the Giants for a while. What they do around him, they might need to do more, but we'll see. Um, I, I think it's a wonderful time to be a sports reporter in the Bay Area because there's a lot of intriguing things. The sports teams right now, though, are leaving a little bit to be desired in terms of their performance, and so hopefully people can ride this kind of weird year out because the Niners were unfortunate. The Giants are being the Giants at the moment, and the Warriors are doing some unusual things, let's say.
And
So
then you've got the upswing, like the Sharks have a couple of really electric young players, and all of a sudden they look like they're going back the right direction. And I mean, the A's were one of the best teams in the second half of baseball last year.
yeah, it's really tough, I think, to understand how people feel about the A's because what they do on the field is one thing, but I think there's a lot of people just completely off put by everything else going on with them. I mean, the impact of their move, I wrote a story yesterday about how it's already impacted the River Cats, who are now going to play 6 home games in Tacoma, Washington in June, just so they can kind of get the field resodded so it's not as beaten up by I think the total count is 150 home games from in a 6 month span. So they're going to try to they're creating a week of no baseball when every other week is going to have it. But the A's are basically crashing on Sacramento's couch here, and I think a lot of
Right.
people are really unsure of how to treat them and view them because baseball fans might just watch them as a baseball team, but it'll be quite obvious every time they play at home what this situation is, and I think it's going to be a really unusual and strange dynamic. And so we'll see. There's all sorts of fun and interesting sports stuff happening kind of underneath the surface, but there's also a lot of weirdness happening too. So
Right. Right. And the A's have spent more money than the Padres this offseason.
Yeah.
if it weren't for Adamas, I think it'd be more than the Giants.
Yeah, I
So,
think you're right.
uh, but yeah, it's an interesting time to be in the Bay Area, and there's a lot of stuff that are coming to a head here, and I'm excited to kind of be around and cover as much of it as we do, but also just get to watch and be fascinated by all of it. I do think, by the way, that probably the biggest story 2025 is going to be the WNBA team in town. Now that we have a WNBA team, I think a lot of people are really excited about this in the Bay Area, and it should be quite the show when they get rolling. So
Excellent.
Good
Excellent.
stuff.
Hey, Alex, where are they? Are they playing in the same place as the Warriors are playing?
they're playing at Chase Center, yes.
Okay,
So
cool.
they'll be right down the street from the Giants quite often this summer. Even head to
Mhm.
head, they have a few games where they're both playing at the same time, and I will be very fascinated to see who gets more butts in the seats on those nights. If the Giants start slow, it could get really interesting in that dynamic.
Right.
I think the Giants kind of desperately need to have a strong start to the season because I don't know if they're as ready for how competitive the landscape's about to be for them down the street. So we'll see.
Good thought. Good thought. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll
Hey,
have to have you back on and follow up on some of these things here in a couple of months and
Yeah.
yeah.
see where we are.
You know
Alex
what?
will join us, but we have to give him beer. We have to give
Yeah,
him beer.
Yeah.
we can do that.
I don't know if I want him back. He's showing me up pretty good. He's showing me up pretty good tonight. I may lose my job.
I don't want to have anybody lose jobs because I'm here.
Well, thank you, Alex, for joining us. You're more than welcome back. We will definitely reach out again and ask you to join us. But thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you all for having me, and I really appreciate, and especially hearing from two old teammates when they chime in while listening there too. So you can tell those low lives to maybe make it on the podcast next time. Then. So,
All right. Well,
Outstanding, Alex. Thank you.
thank you. Hey, Alex, you can stay on if you want to watch the rest of this mess. But I'm going to do Robbie's favorite part of the show now. We're going to talk about other shows on the platform, right?
It's a
Rob?
segment of the show I like to call.
well, I think Michael's not going to be happy if I don't make it a practice on time. So I think I should probably step off at this point here and make sure that I get over there. You know, the fourth graders aren't going to run themselves, right? Someone's got to make it.
Oh yeah, fourth graders. Good luck with that.
We need it. Yes, we need it.
Thanks again.
Thanks,
Alex. All right. Yep. Here's the part of the show where we've been very lucky that the mic'd up folks find us funny and continue to allow us to put on this train wreck every week. And there are some other shows on here that are infinitely better quality than this one. And Rob's going to tell you about them.
Can I interrupt at this point though before we get to there? There was one show that I saw on the lineup the other day, and I said, "Oh, this could be interesting." So I turned in live to Jim Darby's show about Cal baseball, and Coach New was on the show, the head coach of the Cal baseball team. And I put in a question, and so of course they ignored me. That's a smart move anyway. But I hope that that continues because that is very insightful. That Cal has a good baseball team, but they're playing in a new league, so I'm really intrigued to see how that pans out for them. So I'm going to put it
number one ranked team in the ACC right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but that's the big thing is that there's a lot of traveling. There's a lot of time away from school so we'll have to see if that takes a toll. But anyway, I want to make a plug for Jim Darby's new show, the Cal Baseball. So yeah.
So that will be called Inside Cal Baseball.
Yeah.
And yes, Jim Darby will be hosting that. Jim is the announcer for all of the games, the home games for the Bears. And we have got some interest from Cal in doing some regular shows with the baseball team. And Robbie, I don't know if you know that, but Coach Mike New is from the Napa area where you
Napa
are.
High School graduate. Yep.
So they did talk a little bit about that, and show went well, and everybody had fun. So yes, you will see more of that.
Yeah, that's good.
Coming up in the near future. Of course, Jim is still doing his own show, and that he's going to be back on the air tomorrow, and he's going to do a show about this upcoming season in college baseball. It'll be interesting for him because he's going to be basically talking a little bit about how Cal is now involved in the ACC and how much different that is to prepare and all the travel that's going to take place. And he'll also talk a little bit about his interview with Mike New. Let's see what else we got. AJ Robner. AJ's got a couple of shows. He's got one tomorrow morning. And he's going to be talking about the New York Giants. So AJ is well aware his team is not very good, but he's very excited about who they might draft. And I think we're going to be talking about the quarterback from Colorado. That's who the Giants
Oh,
are fixating on as the player they might take in the upcoming draft. So AJ and Sam Kirk will be doing a show tomorrow talking about the Giants. That you'll see that in the upcoming list. Then the following day, he'll be joined by Steve Monaco, and they are going to talk New York Rangers. So each week, AJ and Steve will do a catch up on how the Rangers are playing. It's interesting. They started off great, had a bunch of injuries and some letdowns, and now they're playing very good again.
yeah.
So they are on the periphery of the playoffs, and AJ and Steve are very excited about that. So you'll see them coming up. Craig Giannino's got a show coming up on February 5th. It's the mindset of sports is what he's talking about. And he's going to be talking to an expert in yoga and how yoga can help prepare an
Oh,
athlete to be a better player by putting them in the right mindset before their event. So look for that on February 5th. And then, Robbie, are you ready?
Oh yeah.
Our friends at Yankees Coast to Coast. They will be coming back with a show on tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern. And yes, they're going to be talking about the Yankees, and they're going to be talking about what the Yankees can do to improve before the regular season, before spring training, I should say. And the one thing that they pointed out in their blurb this week is that the Yankees are worth $7.2 billion, but that their payroll is only 300 million, and that it should probably be more if they want to try to compete. So could be interesting to see. And then, of course, we will be back here next week. Yes, this was our first interview show, and yes, we are planning to do a few more interview shows. But don't worry, the top fives are not going away. So look for us. We'll make an announcement as soon as we can about what we're doing next Wednesday night.
Hey,
All right.
we got a call in from Tiger. Very relevant to what you were just talking about.
Tiger here. Stanford women's volleyball racked up 33,000 miles traveling to away games this fall. I wonder how it's going to affect the Cal baseball team.
well, that I have a friend that has been at Stanford for many years. She's in the administrative offices, and we talk a lot. She's big on sports, and that was the big thing. I think that Cal and Stanford are going to have a tough time recruiting with that in the back pocket. That they're now in the ACC and putting on those miles on the road. I have to think that's got to be. Uh, um, a minus in any good recruitment process.
Mhm.
But
On the other
anyway, that's
hand,
my thoughts.
you could say that frequent flyer miles are as a recruiting tool, right? We're going to get you some air miles.
Is that under image and likeness, image likeness and miles
Yeah.
and airplane miles?
All
Oh
right.
man.
So before we go off the air, I want to do some shameless plugs for the lowlifes themselves.
Cool.
So the the highlights from lowlifes, as you know, have been traveling each year. They do a baseball trip across the country, and this year, in early June, we will be going to Louisville, Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh as our 2025 road trip. I think this will be our fourth annual, right? Fourth or fifth annual.
Fourth, yeah.
If you want to know a little bit more about our trips, you need to buy a book that we are featured in called My Baseball Story. And if you want to order the book, it's called, you can find it at mybaseballstory.com. The book is a beautiful book, a coffee table sized book, probably weighs about 5 pounds, 350 pages of stories written by people across the country about their love of the game of baseball. Beautiful color photos. And the lowlifes are featured on pages 332 and 333. We have our own story about our travels during our first 3 trips. That would be year 1, Cooperstown. Year 2 would have been St. Louis and Kansas City. And year 3 would have been Chicago and Milwaukee. Great trips. So, great book. I think it's $50. And if you think that's a lot, consider it probably costs $100 to ship it to you. But just a beautiful book, and we're proud to be a part of it. So,
Yes. Yep.
Yep. Anything else, guys?
I think you got it.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining us. Play us out, Rob.
Thank you, Almanac.
Oh yeah. Don't forget those guys. And thanks to Alex one more time. That was great.
Yeah, he was tremendous.
Yeah.
From Lowlifes.
See you guys next time.